1. I did 3 years on night audit and a year and a half of day shift. That was more than enough for me, to be honest. I worked in a popular seaside destination in the UK. Think piers, hen parties, and stag do's, and of course rock candy. One of my favorite stories is the one of Pigeon Man. Pigeon Man would come and visit us yearly for 3 or 4 nights. He was Canadian, he was even-tempered, and he always kept to himself and never complained. Pigeon Man had always requested no housekeeping during his stay, so on this one occasion, it didn't seem strange that nobody has accessed his room for a number of days. Checkout day arrives, and I greet Pigeon Man and ask him if he had a nice stay. What he did, and handed him his receipts and took back his room key. Everything was fine, just as usual, Pigeon Man says with a smile. Could I call him a taxi to the station? Yes, of course I can, and proceed to do so. As he was about to go outside to greet his taxi driver, he then goes to me. Please let the housekeepers know about the birds, just so they're not too surprised by them. And then goes to leave. What birds, sir? Sneaky little fuck has just been in the lobby for 30 minutes and has waited until the very last possible second to inform me of the birds. He lets me know that on his first night he put some biscuit crumbs on the window ledge to attract some pigeons to take photos of them in front of the sea view through his window. Some of the birds came inside the room. Now, as per regulation, these windows open only about 8 inches. Plenty of room for a pigeon to enter through, but not nearly enough for them to see it as an exit once they're inside. I'm sure you see where this is going. Pigeon Man leaves with a smile and a wave. I don't dare ask housekeeping to be the first ones to see whatever has happened to this room in 4 days of pigeons being stuck inside. I immediately close the room off under maintenance and call our house maintenance team to go look. Upon entering the room, approximately 6 pigeons start flying around, going wild. Feathers and shit everywhere, no lie. Bird crap covering every single available surface. Maintenance calls down to let me know, and that we need to get someone out to gather up these birds. Over the course of the next hour, we call every rescue group and wildlife charity we can think of, and not one of these people will come out. The major charity groups do not respond for common birds like pigeons and seagulls, and the smaller groups will only come rescue in the event of injury or threat to habitat. Coahw's front desk staff and 2 maintenance men spending the next 2 hours with the swimming pool's scooper net, trying to catch these birds or send them back out the window. Needless to say, Pigeon Man was billed with a cleaning fee, and the price of the room for it being off sale for the midsummer night so that the room could be professionally cleaned. We don't expect housekeeping to do that level of deep clean, as in all fabrics removed and hot washed, all carpets shampooed, all walls, fixtures, fittings sanitized. Pigeon Man was no longer welcome back to the hotel. 2. This is a long and slightly tragic story. Some guests create problems because they're assholes, but others genuinely just need help, and unfortunately, as a guest service agent, I'm not always in the best position to do that. So the story begins on a weekend night. I get a call from an elderly-sounding man asking if we have a weekly rate for him and his brother. Apparently, there was an electrical fire in their house in the town about half an hour away. They had been staying in a hotel in that town but had to leave because the hotel was sold out for some event. In hindsight, this should have been a red flag, since it is still early in the year for major events and in general, it is just unlikely that a hotel in a small town sells out in the middle of April. We also don't like to take locals at our hotel, because they often just rent the room to drink or do drugs and trash the room. But I'm not expecting that from these guys given their age, plus they live far enough away that they technically aren't locals. The guy sounds reasonably intelligent and put together, so I decide to give them the benefit of the doubt and book them. But I tell them I am only able to book them for a week, and they will need authorization from the general manager for a longer stay after that point. So I explain we don't have a weekly rate, but the senior rate is such and such per night, and quote him an estimated total for a 1-week stay. He asks if we are pet-friendly, and explains that they have a cat, and I tell him that we charge a pet fee of $20 a night, He asks if he can get that fee reduced since they may be staying here longer than a week. Again, I tell him that I would require approval from the general manager. The next week, they cancel their reservation because they have a friend who is letting them stay at his place, and I'm honestly a bit relieved. Saturday night at 11:30 p.m., the same guy calls asking if we have a weekly rate. Again, in hindsight, this is a red flag. It isn't normal for someone to book an extended stay at 11:30 p.m., but I guess I was just naive or slow to pick up on clues. In general, I'm probably too eager to give people the benefit of the doubt, or at least for this job. So we go through the same song and dance about only booking them for a week, the pet fee, talking to the GM about approving a reduced pet fee, etc. They check in on my day off, and when I arrive the next day, my GM starts talking about them, how there is an unpleasant cat odor coming from their room, and how she has to repeatedly spray Febreze in the public areas throughout the day. I look in the computer system and see that she approved a reduced pet fee, and has allowed them to book out 2 weeks. I'm a little surprised that she decided to be so generous given past issues with extended stays and pets. Eventually, the guests make their way through the public area and the cat smell intensifies. It is a very strong smell and extremely unpleasant, and I feel a bit nauseous. The smell is not just in the room, but is coming from their clothes, particularly the older of the 2 guys. Nevertheless, they are pleasant guys and we chat for a few minutes. They identify me as the person who booked them over the phone, and after they leave, I spray more Febreze to cover the appalling odor. At this point, I put 2 and 2 together and realize the hotel they were previously staying in probably kicked them out because of the cat smell, and the odds aren't too bad that their friend kicked them out of his place for the same reason. The next day, the smell is worse, and the GM and I talk about how it is making us and other staff feel sick. The Febreze isn't covering it anymore. It's only a matter of time before we get a guest complaint. She says she thinks she will have to tell them to leave. This is where, once again, my desire to help people out makes situations worse, because I suggest to the GM that maybe if she tells them about the problem, they will make efforts to clean up themselves and the room. She agrees it's possible, and decides to let them stay a bit longer and see if they improve. So after the GM tells our foul-smelling guests they need to clean up, they make a big show about asking for Febreze for their room, Tide Pods for laundry, etc. They start to smell somewhat better, which is an encouraging sign. I have a day off after that, and when I return, I see the guests are now scheduled to check out and have been charged a $250 cleaning fee. Actually, they were told they had to leave the day before because of guest complaints about the smell. But they pleaded with the GM to let them stay until 4 for a late checkout, and then at 4 they pleaded again to stay until the next morning, and lo and behold, at 10 a.m. they approach the desk and ask if they can have a late checkout. Now, at this point, I should have put my foot down, but I feel kind of bad because of how old and in poor health they are. So I tell them I'll forward their request to the GM. GM goes back and forth on it for a few minutes, first tells me yes, then no, then yes again, but no later than 1 p.m., as there will be a late checkout fee. I decided to tell them no later than noon, since then maybe we have a chance of getting them out by 1 o'clock. Housekeeping tells them there's no way that smell is coming out from a single cleaning, so it's not like we can sell the room that night anyway. I call the guest room to let them know, and no one picks up, so I go down to the room to knock on the door. I hear muffled words, but no one opens the door. Eventually, the younger of the 2 seniors comes back from the gas station across the street, and I explain the situation to him. The older guy is irate and starts swearing at me and telling me that I scared the cat by knocking on their door. And now they won't be able to catch the cat, and now we'll have to stay here until 4 p.m. How about that? He also threatens to tell the media about our hotel, to which I just shrug while his brother quietly shakes his head in the background and tries to get him back in the room. At this point, housekeeping starts talking about how these 2 men really need help and should probably go into an assisted living place. Plus, the older guy has open sores on his body which probably need medical attention. His younger brother even admitted that he should be in the hospital. I realize that the hotel they're going to that night will probably kick them out as well, so I suggest that maybe I should call the police to do a wellness check on them. is a bit awkward at this point because it will just look like we're trying to kick them out when we said they have until noon. But the housekeepers and GM agree it's a good idea. And maybe the police can help them find the medical help and whatnot that they need. So I call the police and explain the situation, emphasizing that this is a call for a wellness check, not so much about kicking them out of the hotel, although it would be good if they reminded them about the checkout time. Half an hour later, a single police officer arrives and talks to them for about 20 minutes. He comes back to the desk and tells me, "Your guests have been collected." I look around in every direction for the guests, but they're nowhere in sight. He clarifies, "I told them they had to be out by 12:30. Okay, are they going to another hotel or what are their plans? Not really my concern, the officer tells me shortly. Do you think they need medical help? No, I've seen worse. One of the housekeepers asks if he noticed a smell in the room. I've smelled worse. Apparently, the officer considers this situation to be a waste of his time and has worse situations to deal with, so we stop badgering him with questions and let him go. I call a cab for the guests, and they left just before 1 p.m. So calling the police was a complete waste of time since they didn't do anything to help our guests, and left without even ensuring they left the building or had a cab. I thought about the situation, and I realized that if the guests didn't want to go to a hospital, weren't interested in assisted living, and could pay for a hotel, there maybe wasn't really anything the officer could do. It was just frustrating knowing that these guys needed assistance, and instead were wasting money to stay at hotels that would inevitably just evict them, and apparently the police were unable or unwilling to do anything for them. At the same time, I can now get through my shifts without feeling nauseous, which is a plus. 3. Small rant and background. I am a night auditor in a Patel-owned Lumpford Inn. I am blessed in that the owner and I share a disdain for trouble-causing and entitled guests, and he lets me do my job and backs me up. It's a small group of us, hotel is relatively small, and luckily we mostly deal with CLC reservations, but we're also in a casino and meth town, so we often have to deal with some terrible people. I don't know if anyone here has ever dealt with these Jenny Finch parents, but they were the worst I have ever dealt with, leaving their kids unattended constantly, letting them tear through the hotel, blocking the entire back parking lot to drink and play cornhole all night, etc. One woman, in particular, ended up on the DNR list, which is an accomplishment for our hotel, because we let all sorts of things go on and still rent to people. Has anyone here ever called Child Protective Services on someone at your hotel? This woman wouldn't let her kids get our lemon water from the fountain because Mommy's gonna need that tonight, and I don't want you drinking at all. Also, she told her daughter she shouldn't eat breakfast because she needed to lose weight. I gave the kids water from the marketplace and bought them some stuff from the vending machine and sent them to find her the last night they were here. During that last night, she was wandering around with a vodka bottle, slurring her speech and drinking outside, sitting on multiple guys' laps throughout the night. She then passed out in our lobby, and when I woke her up, she went to our breakfast area and spilled batter from the waffles all over everything. I don't have access to the cameras on the 3rd floor, but apparently another guest said in the morning that she made them sit outside the room most of the night while she was outside. A few nights before, she had given her kids, both girls included, zigzagged drunk haircuts. And when I saw them that night at 11, when I pulled up to work, she had them playing baseball in our busy parking lot, so I had to get her from the back, drinking again, and come watch them. I am legit worried about these kids. Would it be unethical of me to contact the county she lives and talk to CPS about this? Also, one of the people in the group of their unsupervised kids flushed washcloths down our toilets, and we had to get the Roto-Rooter out. Almost all the parents were similar to her. We spent a lot of time returning kids to their parents, over and over again. Then they all have the nerve to act entitled and rude when you talk to them about basic rules at the hotel. Sorry for the rant. 4. Context. I work for a small franchise extended stay brand with less than 100 rooms, and is under one of the major hotel groups. We're brand new, not even at our 6-month mark yet. So shortly after our opening, we get a guest that was staying with us through a temporary housing program, with the room paid for by his insurance. His story was that unbeknownst to him, a fugitive was living in the home, and the SWAT team wrecked the house looking for the fugitive. He starts with one room housing himself, 4 dogs, and his children are frequently there helping him out since he's wheelchair-bound. Throughout his stay, we have a few incidents, but nothing major or really noteworthy. Biggest one, we had to kick out a partner of one of the kids at his request, only for him to have her back the next day sneaking in the side door. Weird situation for sure, but management just chalked it up to him being embarrassed about changing his mind. So fast forward to this week. His home is ready, so insurance sends us a notice that they will no longer be paying for the room after last Friday. He opted to pay for 2 additional nights on his own. On his move-out day, we had multiple employees assisting him with loading his things and moving them to the side door where his son had their truck and trailer to transport it all. We already allowed them access to the room past checkout time as a courtesy, since, for the most part, he hadn't caused us many issues. I work the night audits at this property and come in at 7 p.m. My GM is still here doing some computer work. I get told when I arrive, by an FDM, that they are aware he's still here, and I shouldn't think anything of it if I see them coming and going from the room while finishing up. This was not true. The GM was about to head home for the evening before noticing that all his stuff was by the side door, but the guest himself was nowhere to be seen. She immediately catches on to the fact that he was actually in the room at like 9 p.m. just sort of chilling out. So cue GM and I walking down the hall under the impression we're just going to have to deal with fighting over getting the room charges for the night, since he was not supposed to still be in the room. When we get there, he's now sitting by the side door, and the son's truck is right outside. He tells us he's been waiting on his son to get out of the car and help him finish loading up. This is when things took a turn for the worse. Immediately, the GM noticed that the windows were fogged to the point of being opaque with the dogs inside the car. The son is in the driver's seat, barely conscious and high out of his mind. We get the dogs out of the car, and I stand with the guest and stall the son while we wait on the police to arrive, as neither the GM nor myself were comfortable allowing the son to drive a vehicle in that state. By the end of it all, the son gets arrested, car gets left there, and we give the guest the room for the night for whatever he was able to pay us. The son is yelling at his dad during this whole incident, berating him and blaming him for the arrest. That on its own was bad enough, right? Well, we find out from the local police some details about the whole SWAT situation and his family that don't add up with what the guest has told us. The GM and I start down a rabbit hole the next day of looking into the news reports about the raid and arrests for the people who stayed on our property. What we found out was that almost none of the relationships they told us they had to each other were right. The woman who claimed to be from the cleaning company dropping off his clothes was his ex-wife. History of trafficking. The son has no connection to the guest that we can find out, other than sharing an address. History of trafficking. The person he claimed was his son's girlfriend was in fact his current wife, that he separated from, and was half his age. History of trafficking, etc. There were also numerous people who had come by during his months-long stay that we simply didn't have names to look into. After all this, we figured out the obvious. The entire time they were staying with us, our hotel was being used as a meetup point for their drug trafficking. Almost every single person staying with us and that visited him had a history of drug offenses. The latest any of them had their last arrest was 2019, and many of them had histories of domestic violence. The rooms were absolutely trashed, to the point we're going to have them out of order for the rest of the week, hoping we can get the odor out. Lesson learned. When in doubt, Google your guests. 5. I'm the GM of a budget extended stay hotel outside of St. Louis. We are in a beautiful upscale area, but our clientele tends not to be so upscale. The hotel has a long, sordid history, prior to my management company taking over about 2 years ago, but I have worked extremely hard to clean the place up. So cue last Friday around noon. A very disheveled young lady comes in with her little dog. She definitely seems like she could be under the influence and or having some mental health issues. She comes in and says she just spoke to someone about her reservation, but they hung up on her. She tells me the name and phone number in which she called, but we have no reservation for her and the number isn't ours. But I do have an extra room and I'd be happy to make you a reservation. Check-in isn't until 3 p.m., but if you'd like to pay the early check-in fee, I can get you in now. Lo and behold, she has no ID. Sorry, ma'am, I can't rent to you. So she walks outside with her dog and sits on the ground. She didn't have a vehicle. About 30 minutes go by, and I've now had multiple guests come and tell me that as they walked out the door, she was begging for things: cigarettes, phone charger, money. I've also been out a few times, and while her dog was on a leash, she wasn't holding on to the dog or the leash. So finally I go tell her we've had complaints and she needs to leave. She calls me a liar and gets agitated, but I just remind her she needs to go, and I go back inside. Another 30 minutes later and she's still out there, dog running around, so I call the non-emergency number to have them ask her to leave. They're busy and it's gonna be a while, so I go on about my tasks. Give it another 30 minutes, and she comes into the building to use the lobby phone to call 911, because she claims she has an emergency. She keeps dialing and hanging up, dialing and hanging up, dialing and hanging up to 911. As she's doing this, I called the non-emergency back, and they said they're aware of her, because she keeps dialing 911 and hanging up after not saying anything. As I'm on the phone with the dispatcher, this bitch pulls the fire alarm next to the phone. My staff is yelling at her and asks why she did it, and she says she has an emergency and that's the only way they're going to come out and take care of her emergency. Mind you, this woman appears completely fine, no medical emergency or anything. After pulling it, the entire building's fire alarm's going off. She takes off running outside. The police got there before the fire department did, and they intercepted her and her dog on the way out. They asked what her emergency was, and she played dumb like it wasn't just her that was calling and hanging up, or her that just pulled the fire alarm, despite the whole thing being on camera. Lo and behold, she had several warrants out for her arrest, had drugs on her, and was arrested. They took the dog because it turns out the dog had been reported missing a few hours before she showed up at our property. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Coahw, episode 116. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please poke the like button if you'd be so kind. Also, if you'd like to get these videos a little bit early, you can support me through Patreon, which is linked in the description. And you'll also find the link to the Hellfreezer merchandise store, and you can make donations during videos and streams if you wish to do so. This is not required, but it is very helpful. Thank you kindly. Alright, let's see. No other business today as far as I'm aware. I think there's a birthday shout-out coming up, but I'll have to check. So let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is: do you have any plans for summer vacation, if you go on summer vacation? And if not, what will you be doing to relieve the heat, the boredom, and the stress of summer? I, myself, I don't really schedule my vacation seasonally. In fact, it's been quite a while since I've had a break when I think about it. I need to try and see if I can maybe work like 2 weeks ahead or something so I can take a week off. But, when you're self-employed, that's just how it goes. It has its ups, it has its downs, but it has more ups and downs, to be honest with you. But please do let me know what you think in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.